Perfect example to what I was just saying. When Unwriter created the Atlanta Slack, he put up these 5 rules for the Slack. And the reason he had these rules in the first place was because his previous community was a Telegram channel back before the BCH BSV fork. And once the fork started happening, all this animosity comes out of nowhere, and everybody's like, talking smack to each other and everything else. And he just is like, I just want to focus on building. I don't want any of this crap. So he left his own Telegram channel, created a Slack channel with these rules. And one of the rules on there, I think, is so just simple and brilliant. It's show by doing. You don't need to tell everybody else that they're doing something wrong in order to whatever. Just do it the right way and talk about why you're doing it that way. That's enough for the people who aren't doing it right to understand why they're not doing it right. You don't need to, directly publicly criticize everybody who's not doing things the way that you imagine that they should be done. I think that's just overkill.
Welcome back to the show. Today we have Frames Janko joining us. Hello, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. For everybody else, my real name is Luke, but yeah, Frames is the monkey ear.
Awesome. So yeah, I totally wanted to get right into this and be like, you've mentioned in other interviews that Jamify was born really out of necessity and that you created it in just a couple of days. And I think that really highlights just how easy it is to build on an open protocol like Run. So I was curious if you could kind of explain that process of building that out. Like, is it just because Run is so easy to develop on that you were like, let's just knock this out?
I cut a lot of corners, intentionally. I was trying to basically just hit, I was on vacation, right? So I had to go back to the real world and back to my big to-do list. And this was something that was kind of like, not the main part of my life. Like the music stuff was always just kind of like a hobby, but a lot of fun, something I enjoy. So I was just kind of trying to crank it out before the new year, really. And so that's when I ended up launching it, was on New Year's Eve, like right as the year was turning, which was pretty neat that ended up working out. But yeah, the reason that I was able to do it so quickly is because I did cut a lot of corners. I leaned a lot on what Relay has built. They have an API that's publicly accessible that gives you, the state of the chain in terms of like, the various like, orders and things related to a certain token and things like that. So I just basically built a simple kind of sub catalog of the existing catalog of stuff that uses order lock that's on the chain, and slowly we'll work ourselves out of being dependent on Relay or anybody else, and we'll just use the blockchain directly. That's always the goal.
Yeah, and I think that moves us right into the other thing that you said during that interview, which was in the future, you will be able to click a few buttons and launch a new website that inherits an entire catalog of existing activity. So I was hoping you could elaborate a little bit more on the thought process there.
Yeah. So this is something really, really cool that I think people don't realize is so powerful that Bitcoin unlocks, which is up until this point, historically, we use our own databases. When we build anything, we build a database to go with it to house all the data. That's why Facebook has a giant database of all their user data, and Twitter has a database of their user data and all this. But we have this really cool new opportunity where Bitcoin is basically a shared database between multiple applications. And so when you have a shared database, if you have a shared protocol structure, that's basically like your database schema. It's basically like the organization of what fields you're going to need, what the data types are, all of that kind of conceived knowledge that you have to build whenever you build anything can basically it can exist, it can be published, and tools can be published to use that exact format. So you don't have to think about any of that stuff. And that can basically be automated to some degree. And you inherit this body of data that exists on chain. And so you could build a brand new app that looks and feels like a social network with activity already there, but all the activity is just from other websites and it's already on the blockchain and you're just able to show it. And it's a totally crazy idea, because this this can exist now, right? So, for example, Twitter has an API, and you can easily build a Twitter clone using the Twitter API. And there's tools out there to help you do that very easily. And so, yeah, you can kind of click a couple buttons and make an alternative to Twitter, but it's still locked into Twitter. The big difference here is you're using open protocols against the blockchain, and there is no company that's in the middle of what you're doing. So it's a real paradigm shift there.
I imagine that's going to make building businesses and everything on Bitcoin in the future so much easier. Like, I feel like a lot of people get ideas in their head that really could be awesome to be built on Bitcoin, but they get nervous about, what is that production process like? And, how much money am I going to need to get it started up? So what would you say to somebody that has, a potentially great idea in their head, but maybe timid? And would you suggest Run, or, would you suggest other protocols?
Run for me was chosen because the content existed. There was a bunch of music that was coming out on, it's actually a kind of a funnier story than that. I wrote a song as Frames Janko, which nobody knew was me at the time. And it was pretty critical of NFTs, and it was called Satoshi-san. And I made like a lyric video to it and put it on YouTube. And then somebody in the comments says, hey, you should mint this as an NFT on Relay, which I thought was hilarious. I'm like, yeah, I definitely should do that. And I did. But then what happened was then people bought it, which kind of drug me through a range of emotions, which is one of like, holy shit, now I have like an obligation to make sure that this thing is valuable, what people just bought. Like, I don't want to just sell them some useless thing that they're just speculating on or whatever, right? And so it got me thinking about NFTs and utility and specifically for musicians and all this stuff. And then by the time I wrote the second, I had another song that was written that I wanted to put out. I kind of realized the existing interface wasn't really designed for audio. I was going to put it out on Relay, and kind of nobody was going to see it. It was kind of go into a big sea of other JPEGs. And I wanted to have a place where all the music was kind of in one spot, curated and looked nice and felt a little bit familiar, like kind of a Spotify, like music manager type of interface for NFTs. So that's how that really kind of happened. And now I kind of don't remember exactly what your original question was. I want to make sure I'm circling.
It was like, basically, what would you say to somebody who may have an idea about building on Bitcoin? Yeah, but maybe timid.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, it's going to be somewhat difficult because this is not a super mature ecosystem with tons of really great, easy to use tools or whatever, but the basics are out there, and we've got a lot of really smart people in the space who are very, very willing to help and point you in the right direction. And there's tons of places to go to at least get started. And even if you don't achieve the goal of building what you want to build, you're going to get enough out of it to where it's totally worth the process. You're going to learn. And maybe, this first idea won't be the thing that really works out for you, but the next one will, right? It's just worth it. This is where everything's going to be. This is the future of how the internet is going to evolve. There's just no doubt about it. So there's no downside to just kind of diving in.
It's funny, while we were speaking, I may have to cut this part out, but while we were speaking, I just remembered you from Miami. Were you the one with the hot wife with the
oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, definitely.
I was just remembering, I hung out with her there. I was like, oh, now I remember. Yeah. You look a little bit different with the cap on, but now I remember that. I'm sorry. I know that was totally off topic, but I was fine. I remember now. Anyway, yeah. So, gosh, I frazzled myself.
All right, you can keep that in. She'll be happy.
She was really sweet. But yeah, anyway. So yeah, I know that in like your previous interviews and everything, you were talking about, so you're the creator of Tonic Power. You're also the creator of Jamify. So it's kind of cool how these two platforms that you created kind of, assist each other in the sense that you can mint an audio NFT on Jamify and then promote it through Tonic Power. Was that something that was done intentionally, or is that something that just kind of happened as a happy accident?
I mean, Tonic Power is super, super generic and applicable to like everything. So it makes sense that synergy would be there. It's going to be a lot more pronounced in the future because I think Jamify is going to be the best example of Tonic Power integration that anybody's really seen yet.
So kind of what we have planned for that is, for example, you'll make micropayments anytime you share any Jamify song on Twitter or like wherever. So that's kind of one cool thing. The other thing is you'll get commission on NFT sales. If you bring somebody a sale, they'll have the option to easily create a campaign and offer some percentage of a kickback for anybody who who brings them a sale. So those kinds of things we think are really going to kind of spur a lot of growth on the platform and incentivize a lot of people who aren't musicians and aren't putting things in the catalog to get involved and help grow the pie. But yeah, there's some other stuff too that we'll do that's going to synergize really well. For example, we plan to allow you with Tonic Pow to load up NFTs in your campaign. So you're not just giving away micropayments and BSV as rewards. You could actually be like, you share this campaign and you get so many clicks, and for every so many clicks, you get an NFT instead of BSV, for example. So there's a lot of really cool things coming. Also, we got plans for basically a hosted NFT like buyable page with built-in conversions on Tonic Pow. So that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of synergy there.
So you mentioned that when you built Jamify on Run, you kind of cut some corners there. I mean, was there like this specific process you were like, oh, I'm just going to get this platform out there and then fix it afterwards? Or
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just important to ship. It's really, you like when you're building something, it's never done. And this is what prevents a lot of people. That's why a lot of times you see projects, especially if they get funding, there's a little extra pressure to really deliver something great. And so that can kind of keep people from shipping, but that's not my style really. I mean, I think it's much better to get something out earlier, get all the hate and the criticism and get that early, get that feedback early and make the product better and really draw attention to the places where the work is needed the most. Helps you prioritize, helps people get excited, helps a community build sooner. There's a lot of advantages to just shipping the code. So yeah, bugs and all.
At the beginning of this, we were talking about the previous video and how we were touching on open versus closed protocols. And I was curious as to what your thoughts on open versus closed are. Do you see there being advantages and disadvantages with both of them? And which do you prefer?
Well, I'm really excited about the possibilities of open. I mean, for me, this is the thing we haven't had yet. This is the thing nobody's experienced yet. So we haven't really had this whole era that we're about to go through of messing with this idea and seeing, where the limits are. And closed to me is kind of boring because it's kind of like the old way. A regular database is pretty much a closed protocol, right? But open versus closed protocol, I mean, it's weird because there's not even clear definitions for this stuff right now. And like, for example, you'll hear Craig say something like, and I don't know if he's actually said this before, but I've heard other people repeat it and it sounds like a Craigism. So, saying like BSV is not an open protocol. Well, what's meant by that is BSV is not an open protocol if you're looking to change the protocol. And in general, protocols really shouldn't be changed very much. That's why there's like tight versioning on protocols. If you make a new version of a protocol, people are very careful to make sure it's backward compatible. So all the people using the previous version of the protocol don't have breaking changes.
Right.
And so that, yes, protocols can technically evolve, right? BSV is special in that it's supposed to be something that everyone builds on in all these different industries. So it's really, and the power dynamic, because of the fact that this is money, this is global money, it's really important that that protocol is locked and really doesn't change. So it's a very different beast when you're talking about a protocol there. But what we're talking about are protocols that are on top of Bitcoin, that are like in my case, they're op return data protocols, which eventually, there'll be similar open protocols that exist in like script as opposed to op return. But the point is, you're building on top of Bitcoin and you're publishing a protocol and encouraging other people to use the same protocol and to like cooperate. It's kind of like this whole co-opetition idea. Whereas sure, you could just make a protocol and use it yourself and never really tell anybody how it works and just use it internally. But the difference really between open and closed protocol in that sense is only in your attitude and your implementation. So like, are you encouraging other people to build on the same protocol as you? Are you trying to build this cooperative on-chain schema that is designed for multiple people to use, or are you just trying to use the benefits of the blockchain, putting things on chain, and you needed a protocol for yourself anyway, so you don't bother to tell anybody else about it or document it very well or encourage other people to build on it? That's kind of how I look at what is open versus closed in the sense of, the things that are being built on BSV. But yeah, for the most part, I feel like on-chain protocols, they're really well suited to be shared and used, but again, not always. Some people are just going to build for their own app. They're going to build their own private kind of implementation and not really care about interoperability, and that's totally fine. People can do that. It's not exciting to me.
I feel like the space is really needing more interoperability and being able to. I feel like it's the one thing that's kind of holding us back as an ecosystem right now, is that there's less.
I would totally agree. Yeah, there's not enough of it. But at the same time, I think this space also needs like less of telling other people what to do. Like there's a lot of people in this space that have opinions that like to tell other people how they should do things. And it's really just up to everybody to do whatever the hell they want. That's kind of what's cool about BSV being an open protocol anybody could build on. But I definitely do agree that like there should be more enthusiasm around open protocols, just because it's really freaking cool. And what you can build with open protocols at the end of the day is like exciting. And we should all be like pretty happy about that and wanting to experience it.
So if I had Brenton Gunning on the show today and he were with us, what would be like one thing that you would ask him to maybe change to help grow the innovation of like Jamify or any of your other future projects? Would there be anything that you asked him to change to make Run better? Or
I mean, my usage of Run so far is actually pretty limited, so I'm not really the best person to speak on like super detailed like implementation changes that I think would really benefit the ecosystem type of thing. And I also think it's just like there's certain people in the space that I have a ton of respect for. He's one of them. I think they've been doing a really great job. I think he's brought some really amazing people on that team that I really love. I'm very excited about the future of what they're going to build and what they're going to do. So I think it's just better that I would just stay out of his way.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So I guess my question to you would be, one of the things that I'm very interested in from like a YouTuber standpoint, right, is recently we got one of my NFT, we took one of my podcasts and we turned it into a audio NFT and we put it on RelayX. I want to get it on Jamify as well. But one of the things that is kind of limiting in that sense is the fact that there is a, minor 10 megabyte cap. And so I'm curious if like, I don't know how the interoperability right now is between like RelayX and Jamify. Do you go to the Jamify website and directly mint on Jamify, or is it like?
No, we're very dependent on Relay for a lot of things right now in terms of like, we don't have our own minter yet. It's on the list. I've got a big chunk of it built out, but there's more to do. Long form audio is a huge priority. It's definitely something that we want because it's not just podcasts. I mean, think about it. Podcasts are enormous. A lot of people want to put their podcasts on Jamify. That's going to be really a great thing when that starts happening. Most of them, though, it's hard to get that file size low enough to be able to do it with Relay's Minter. But there's already a lot of work happening on Minters. I literally know of maybe 4 that are in development that are all using Run in one way or another. I know there's efforts from the team at Run to open source the minting component of what they have already, as well as some independent efforts to crowdfund some tools to help do this. And I know we're working on something, and I know of a couple. I know of at least one other secret project. But it's going to happen. And the reason the 10 megabyte limit is there is because it's about a single transaction. A single transaction has that limit, but we have other data protocols that, right now, that's put in there associated with the transaction in a certain way. But there's things like BCAT that allow you to concatenate multiple transactions, so multiple 10 megabyte chunks. and then you can combine them into one token. Relasia actually did this. They used STOS instead of Run, but for the data component, they used BCAT, and they have a 1 gigabyte NFT that is on chain. So this is not an unsolved problem completely. It's just not really built into the tooling. And the other choice is like a lot of people kind of want to avoid something like BCAT because it's a little bit of a hack stringing together multiple transactions. They really just want those limits to be lifted or raised so that we can add a little bit higher, longer audio or whatever directly in one transaction. It makes the management of a token a little bit easier when you don't have it spread across multiple transactions and things.
Yeah, I was actually talking to Kurt about this, and he said that like you could basically hook up to Gorilla Pool's Mappy, and they could basically make it happen that way. So but unfortunately, I don't think RelayX is something I don't want to speak on their behalf or anything.
I know Relay doesn't want to use Mappy, and whether or not that matters is another issue. I mean, maybe you can broadcast to them another way. Gorilla Pool super accommodating, and I'm sure they would work around that if they didn't want to use Mappy or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I love having Gorilla Pool in the ecosystem because they're always trying to push limits and allow developers kind of new tools in order to try things that aren't quite there yet, but it does come at a risk to them. If they were to start accepting larger single transactions than 10 megabytes, they risk getting orphaned. Yeah. And so there's always a balance.
Yeah, always. So I guess we'll move it back to Jamify. Where are you at with like Jamify's roadmap from when you launched to like when you first launched, all the things that you were thinking about getting out there and being able to do and for people to be able to utilize? Where are you at in the development of all of those things that you were originally like, oh, I want to do this, this, and that?
Yeah, I mean, the problem with being kind of like a very active programmer in terms of like thinking about projects and things like that, it's very easy for me to put together exactly what it is that I know that we're going to want and make that to-do list really long. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of things. Prioritizing is a big part of that, but that a lot of times you really want to derive your prioritization from feedback. And so, yeah, I mean, we get questions like, hey, when am I going to be able to put a podcast on, for example? That's a great piece of feedback because, it helps us prioritize the minter, right? There's other people who are like, are more interested in the story from the artist perspective of like, what are the different revenue streams from the artist? Well, that's like a vote for getting the playlist feature finished and getting the like feature, tightened up or whatever. And these things that directly monetarily benefit the artist.
Right.
So basically Jamify has a features page where we listed a handful of different features that we knew that we wanted. A lot of those things got funded, and now I'm working through the backlog of kind of doing those things. Of course, I have some other developer friends who are starting to kind of jump on board and help me a little bit with that because I don't have the bandwidth personally to build all of this stuff, kind of work on a lot of different things, especially with having Tonic Pal in the mix. There's enough to keep me busy there for quite a while anyway. But yeah, I mean, I think we're chugging through. I think it went through kind of an awkward haircut phase recently because it switched over from the very first iteration to kind of a rewrite into a static site, which brought a lot of really big benefits, specifically being able to share songs on Twitter and have that unfurl so you could listen to the song right in Twitter without ever having to leave. That was kind of a big goal, but it was a huge project to transition the site over to the new framework and stuff.
Right.
And then when we did, it introduced a whole bunch of new bugs. So now we're at the point where finally that transition is done. The bugs are pretty much ironed out, and the catalog has been like really, luckily, it's been really cool to see constantly. There's a ton of new artists who have come into BSV and minted songs. I don't know if you've been watching Jamify's feed lately.
Yeah.
But it's kind of crazy. We're having a couple new songs almost every day.
Yeah, I saw my buddy Shift from the Scammers had minted some stuff, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I'll get on there and check it out. It's cool seeing your friends build, and when they're given the tools to be able to create in the ecosystem, that's Absolutely. Really exciting.
Yeah, so. It's really cool to see the BSV people, get involved, and they're they never were here for music, or you know, some of them weren't necessarily here for music, but they, you know, like Bitmonkey's got a couple tracks on there. I'm pretty sure Libs eventually is going to put some stuff on. He does more like DJ sets and stuff. But it's really neat, and those always do really well. But I'm equally excited about all of the artists that come in that have nothing to do. This is their first, you know, their first exposure to BSV, let alone cryptocurrency in many cases. And seeing just musicians use the tool in order to either just explore some kind of new way to be a successful artist, or you know, there's a lot of different reasons for their motivations, but it's just really neat because you see a lot of these BSV projects, and one of the big things has been how do you attract people outside of this ecosystem? And I'm just really I'm pretty proud of Jamify's track record on bringing in people from outside. It's been really great to see.
It's funny because I think I saw Jamify do a tweet the other day. Somebody had mentioned something basically like, how do we build like a Jamify? And then you're like, oh, hello. You were just like, oh, it's already here, right? I thought that was pretty funny because, you know, I look at this as people outside of the BSV community, I feel like are looking and thinking, oh man, all of these things are really cool, that if we could be able to just put it on the blockchain, and then the blockchain that they closely associate themselves with isn't capable of those. It has, you know, their own limitations. And so once they're introduced to BSV, it's like a whole new playground of things that can be done. And so that's why I was like, man, you talking about, you know, just being able to click a few buttons and then put up a whole new website for people to be able to utilize in the future, because all of this stuff will basically be there already sort of built out. And then you just kind of copy it over and make it your own type of deal. That's, to me, is what I'm super stoked for in the future about building on BSV. The more that we can provide utility to the chain, the more inherent value it's going to have. So I'm excited for those things, you know. But, you know, like what are you looking forward to most of all? Like what specifically would you be looking forward to? Not necessarily just about Tonic Power or Jamify, but in the space in general.
It really, for me, it always has been the realization of what this open protocol stuff can do. I mean, a lot of it is open questions. But, you know, I've been on this train for like a long time. I mean, I created a data protocol called Magic Attribute Protocol years ago. And the whole purpose of that was for tagging metadata on transactions so it could be consumed by multiple apps. So like, this is a song that I've been singing for literally years. And it's really, really great for me to hear a lot of people kind of talking about these ideas much more openly in the BSV ecosystem. I kind of felt, you know, I hear Daniel Crowett say this a lot of times on podcasts where he just felt like he was kind of lonely, you know what I mean? And it's like, you go back and look at some of the tools and some of the things that I've been working on for a long time, and it's all geared in this direction. And so, yeah, for me, thinking about and seeing the realization of open protocols in practice, like I really love that blogpost.network is out there. I'm really close to being able to reboot some old projects that existed in BSV in the early days, but relied on infrastructure that's no longer there. You know, we had a couple infrastructure providers that I relied on for a couple things that either I can't confidently rely on anymore, or have stopped, you know, servicing specific functions. One of which is BitIndex back in the day had an XPub indexing service, like a whole API that would do like a read-only index of all your unspent outputs and stuff having to do with an extended public key. And that service was sunsetted quite a while ago, but I had some things that relied on it. And so since then, one of the things that I worked on in between then, it's like you get set back and you have to kind of rebuild some of the infrastructure that you relied on. So we built something for Tonic Power because we needed it for there as well. But it's called Bux, BUX. It stands for Bitcoin, UTXO, and XPub Manager. And it's a big suite of open source software written in Go that basically, well, not just Go, it's Go and JavaScript, but it has a like a library component called Bux Engine, which manages UTXOs for you. It's basically like all of the software that you need to kind of build your own like money button service or like hand cash service or something like that. Like it's the wallet, the tricky bits of building kind of wallet infrastructure that we just wanted to put out there because there really wasn't a good open source solution for doing that on BSV. It's weird because there's another thing that's the light client that was done by Jad and some other of the guys at Nchain at the time that did a lot of work with Go, and we worked a lot with them at the same time. So it's similar in nature to that bunch of software. But the point is, with all the infrastructure that kind of needed to be replaced, finally having that work done, I can kind of get back to the application layer and turn some of these old things on. Like in particular, MetaLens is one that I'm excited about. It's something that existed a long time ago. I don't know if you were around then or you got to use it. But it's just a really cool thing. It's a browser extension that lets you comment basically on any website. So you go to a CNN article and their comments are closed. You can still comment, right? And the comment goes on the blockchain and you can see everybody else's comments on the blockchain. But this is the open protocol idea, right? So those same comments that go on a URL can then show up on blog post of like, hey, so-and-so just commented on this URL, and it just shows up in the feed like everything else. And it's all part of the same big shared data set. So you get all this kind of interesting activity across many apps.
I think we need that.
I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. I think they're trying to do that with like Morning Run, but I do like things in the space move so quickly and things change so quick from like day to day. So it's like it'd be really cool to just log on and be like, oh, this is what happened, or this is what people are talking about, this is what's trending, whatever, and to be able to compile that from multiple different platforms into like one place where you could read or view that type of information. That would be super helpful, especially for somebody like me that's like, oh, what topics are trending right now, so that'd be cool. Gosh, I had a question. You were talking about like Daniel Krauwitz, and I get the feeling, I get that you're not alone in that feeling of like, or his feeling too of gosh, he was talking about like hyper Bitcoinization back in like 2014. So a lot of these ideas that just now people are starting to jump on board and to speak about openly it's taken a while. So I can understand like your frustration and his frustration about just how long it's actually taking.
Yeah, I do have to qualify that though. I can't say alone because there are a couple people who really were with me and did a lot of work on a lot of this stuff. And that's Austin Rappaport and Siggy. Austin's my co-founder in Tonic Pow, and Siggy is the creator of Bitcoin Attestation Protocol, creator of blockpost.network. He was the main developer on Hona, which is another really cool app in the space. He also was part of Legally Chained when that was popping off. So yeah, he's been here and been working towards these same goals for a long time too. So
I think, I think one of the really like something that would be really cool is something that they've been talking about a lot recently is like your personal identity on chain and being able to like utilize that across multiple different apps. I know like right now you can log into most things either with your RelayX or your hand cash or your money button, so on and so forth. But to be able to actually have all of your identity associated on chain with just one thing. So like, for instance, I go to log into Facebook, you could do that with Google or, whatever, like having that type of service, but on the blockchain in this space would be super, super awesome.
That is Bitcoin Attestation Protocol in a nutshell. That's what it's for. So Siggy has, I wish he would just, actually, is it in the market already? Let me check. If it's in the market already, I'm just going to tell you. And have him yell at me later, but I think it already might be. I'm gonna have to look for it offline and let you know. But basically, he created the protocol. It's used in Bitcoin Schema, which is bitcoinschema.org is a collection of basically definitions of how to put data on chain for building social, interactive, open, applications. And it uses a collection of these protocols. It uses Magic Attribute Protocol. It uses Author Identity Protocol, which is another one that I worked on years ago. And then they all piggyback on each other. They're composable protocols that can be used interchangeably. And Bitcoin Attestation Protocol is the last piece, which establishes, it's designed to establish real world identity on top of all of this other stuff that we have. And you can see it in use on blockpost.network, where you create an identity key. You know, it's your own key, it's separate, but then there's like kind of a master key. And if you lose your key that you actually use for regular signing, you can rotate them. And the whole design is around like other entities can attest to like your, let's say, private information without exposing any of the private information on chain, but they can make a record that another company that you give your private information to can check on chain and see if it's accurate, right? And see if that checks out. And this is kind of the design for real world identity, not just, oh, I have a key, therefore I'm this person. No, you need to have all this other stuff that like checks out in order for that to be your real identity. So he's got even a mobile app. It's really, really slick when you kind of see how this is all going to fit together. Like in the future, the way that this will work is you'll go to a website that supports these open protocols, and they'll have a sign-in button, and there'll be a QR code there, and you'll take out your mobile phone and you'll scan the QR code, and it will do the signing and just sign you in or whatever. You never enter a password, any of this stuff, but it's because you have basically an identity wallet on your phone. It's another app. Siggy has actually created this already. His version of the app, which obviously it's an open protocol, so anybody can make their own, but his version of the app is called Heimdall. And it basically just looks like an app where you have a bunch of, you can have multiple identities on there, and you could choose which one to sign in with, right? So maybe you have an identity for your business, you have another one for your personal stuff, and that's how you manage your sign in. So something like Blog Post, you might have a business account that you represent on there or whatever, but really it's all tied to you as a person identity wise, like somewhere way in the background, and you could prove it, but you don't need to necessarily disclose that.
That's super cool. Yeah. Cause I often struggle, like I'm either Brittany or I'm Brittany Bits, and depending. So being able to switch between the two seamlessly, that would be really, really cool. I'm really interested to see and hear more about that. So is it up yet, or how long might we have to wait?
I thought he showed me a link in the market for the actual app, and then his websites. The problem is there's not many sites that have implemented this, but I'll tell you, there are a handful that will have all of this together working. It's a lot of work to get all of this connected. Building something with just like a database is the easiest. Building something with a database plus the blockchain is a little harder. And then building something with a database plus the blockchain that's designed to be interoperable is another step of difficulty. And it requires more moving parts, right? Like we want this sign-in app and all of this other stuff. There was another really, really freaking cool project made by an unknown character called Sobachef, which I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it was Unwriter.
Isn't he gone though?
Yeah, but this was after he was gone. This thing came out called Starfish. And for a little while, Tonic Cow actually added it as a login method. I don't think anybody really got wind of how freaking cool it was, but it's very similar to what I'm talking about with Heimdall without the attestations and the identity stuff, which is very necessary. But it was a simple desktop app that would basically have keys with no money in it that was designed for signing. And so with Tonic Cow, you could like log in using this thing. So instead of like login with Facebook that goes off to some company and asks them for an authentication key, it was going to your local server running on your computer. So you had this little app that was running on your computer, and it would get a network request from the website, and it would sign it and send it back. And the website would say, oh yeah, that signature is associated with this user in my database, so sign them in. And so it's this really cool concept of just using Bitcoin technology in a totally different way, not even having anything to do with micropayments, just for a totally sovereign sign-in system that could have been universal and everybody could use. It's just a shame that these really cool things come out and everybody's just doing their own thing and not like adopting other stuff that's existing. And this just happens when you have a bunch of nerds, because nerds have really strong opinions, and they're going to nitpick oh no, I don't want to use that protocol because it's plain text and I want to use binary and, you know, all this stuff.
So
Just move forward, build.
so do you think that we're having the biggest problem with like, like what you just said, devs like not they're being all geeky and saying no, I
Yeah.
have to be this way, or do you think
Yeah,
it's
it's totally a
something?
big part of it. There's more angles to it, but I think that is definitely a big part of it. But I think that goes away. Like we have like 16 token protocols as well, right? But at some point, Relay started really building into Run and really focusing on that. And then once there was enough there to where people could kind of sink their teeth into it or build something complementary, the snowball starts a little bit. It, kind of takes a little while for that to form. But in the beginning, that initial inertia, you really just need your first handful of adopters. It reminds me of that gif of like the guy at the concert that's like dancing his ass off where like nobody else is dancing. Everybody's like laying on the lawn. And then like one more guy comes over and starts dancing with him. And then like that's all it took. And then the floodgates open and everybody runs into this circle and it becomes a party. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, I know everybody has an opinion about like what needs to happen with the space. So we do need VC funding. We don't need VC funding. We need to increase the value of the network, and all this or that, or close versus open. Like there's so many buzzing topics going on right now about
Definitely.
the space in general. There seems to be quite a bit of consensus there, but interoperability and people just learning to work together a bit more, I think, would be a huge help.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I'll say what I said before. Like, I'm the biggest proponent of interoperability, but at the same time, like, if somebody else wants to do something a different way, and that's not something that they value as part of their model for what they're building, who cares? Like, let them do that. I just feel like we lose more time to, like criticizing other projects inside of BSV. I mean, people are going to do things their own way. They're going to have their own ideas and their own things, and like that happens. And I get the desire to get everybody on the same page at the same time, so I can like appreciate that. But I think what even happens sometimes in this space is that criticism has been so hard and fast because again, INTP nerds have no like sensitivity. And so they just like go full on and just like attack each other. I think that just causes like unnecessary separation where people would be listening to you. They would be listening to your ideas a little bit more if maybe you weren't like throwing rocks at them every chance that you get,
I definitely
Just
agree.
a thought. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I get the frustration, and I also get like the need to just, get along and to pitch ideas to each other and be like, hey, this sounds cool. How do we make this work? So I'm still hopefully optimistic about the future. And
Oh, it's all
so,
going to work out in the end. It's fine. But like, perfect example to what I was just saying. When Unwriter created the Atlantis Slack, he put up these 5 rules for the Slack. And the reason he had these rules in the first place was because his previous, community was a Telegram channel back before the BCH BSV fork. And once the fork started happening, all this animosity comes out of nowhere, and everybody's like, talking smack to each other and everything else. And he just is like, I just want to focus on building. I don't want any of this crap. So he left his own Telegram channel, created a Slack channel with these rules. And one of the rules on there, I think, is so just simple and brilliant. It's show by doing. You don't need to tell everybody else that they're doing something wrong in order to whatever. Just do it the right way and talk about why you're doing it that way. That's enough for the people who aren't doing it right to understand why they're not doing it right. You don't need to, directly publicly criticize everybody who's not doing things the way that you imagine that they should be done. I think that's just overkill.
I think that's eloquently put, and I like that a lot, Luke. I like that a real lot. But I know that we're walking up here, or at least coming up here to the hour mark. So I wanted to know if you had any closing thoughts, anything that you felt like we should really get out there, something that really needs to be said or spoke about. Any closing remarks, I suppose.
I mean, I've said the important stuff. I think it's really just important to be tolerant of other ideas and other people, and you know, for example, there's kind of a perception in the community that like, for example, like the business guys and all that kind of crew that goes to the Dubai conferences are like totally not of this mindset, and they don't think this way at all, and they're not interested in any of these ideas. But like, you know, I went to Dubai and I had a lot of conversations about open protocols with people, and there's a lot of excited people about these concepts there, and just blanketing everybody in and saying these are all the enemy and all this stuff. It's just absolute nonsense.
I agree with that 100%. You know, I've heard a lot of people talk crap about others, and I'm like, hey, you know what? I went to Miami. I met those guys. They were really cool. Like, I don't see them as some like evil, nasty doer, because you know they're going to these places or talking about certain things in particular. It doesn't mean they're against your ideas or how you think things should be done. It just means they're doing their thing and you're doing your thing. That's cool, right? So I don't know. A little bit of a mind shift in the way some people are thinking, I think would be good for the space, because I support everybody. You know, I constantly talk
I
about.
honestly think it comes from a good place. The criticism comes from a good place. I think that they realize that we have a tight timeline, that it's not a guaranteed win, that we need to maybe shake some people into following,
That's a good point.
you know, a more noble path. And so I can totally understand and appreciate that. I just think sometimes it does more harm than good.
There does seem to be like this like very pressing matter of like, we don't have much time left. We need to get this, and we need to be further along than we are right now. And I think that's what's causing a little bit of the.
It is. Yeah, I agree. And I sympathize. It's, you know, it's true at the same time. So.
But you're still optimistic regardless. So
absolutely. I mean, I'm doing my thing. I wake up every day, I write code basically until I fall asleep and rinse and repeat. So
the dream.
If I have anything to say about it or do about it, we'll be all right. I can't do it all myself, but if there's other people as excited about Bitcoin as I have been over the last, I don't know how many years since, you know, 2011 or whatever, now, like, there's so much more that we can do. There's so much more tooling. It gets better every single day to be a developer on Bitcoin. And the excitement only gets stronger. So it's bound to catch other people like it has me. And like I said, yeah, that's the source of my optimism.
Real quick before we go, where do you think we're going to be? Where do you think Bitcoin's going to be in, say, like 3 or 5 years, 3 to 5 years?
So I'm so like jaded on this kind of question because I might have answered this so differently. Like, I don't know. You know, almost 10 years ago.
Right.
But, you know, well, yeah, I mean, you think about the slowdowns that we've had, right? So the optimism in the super early days before the first fork was out of this world. I mean, I was thinking about putting data in transactions back before the first fork, and that got totally squashed. It took years before, you know, the scaling debate settles down. We finally get, you know, a split. And now there's this huge new optimism in BCH. And we finally got an open protocol project that used data on the chain. It was called memo.cash. And I was like the most excited person in the world. I started immediately writing a memo client. By the time I had my whole memo client built and I'm ready to launch it and everything, there's another fork coming. And so I never launched that. And then I had to go back. So now there's a fork, right? And now they're in two different things. So I can't use a lot of the other libraries that were on BCH because they kept the ticker and all this other crap. So now I had to build a JavaScript wallet called Satchel, like from scratch. And that, you know, it's so much wasted time. So from a developer perspective, been in it this whole time, I'm loving life right now because we're past a lot of that crap. This is why I get a little sensitive when people talk about forks and stuff like that, because I think it's just ignorant. Like, just, you know, we don't need to be disagreeing on the core, like protocol stuff and node development or whatever. Like, we're in such a better position than we've ever been on any of that stuff. So a lot of the complaining on that front is like overblown in my opinion. And the important thing is just getting solid infrastructure services for app developers to build, getting good tools. I love the resurgence and the open source kind of attitude. We kind of went through a phase in BSV where we went from starting with a lot of people releasing open source to everybody being super territorial and like starting businesses and not sharing any of their stuff. And now we're kind of seeing the resurgence of the open source kind of movement in the community. Open protocols are being discussed and all this stuff. And I think we need all approaches. We need people out there working on enterprise adoption. We need people out there talking to governments and getting them interested. We need people working on open source stuff. We need all of it.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, Luke, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and sharing your wealth of knowledge and your wisdom and your thoughts with me today. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Was a lot of fun. I'm super like, it's a weird thing, but I've never really loved like kind of doing podcasts and stuff like that. So I always like when it's pretty effortless. This hour went by pretty fast, so I appreciate it.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. You seem to enjoy yourself today, so I'm happy that I could do that for you. At least not make it boring. Right?
Yeah. No, I think it was great. Good discussion.
Awesome. Well, with that being said, guys, go ahead and smash up the likes and subscribe button, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below. Share this video with a friend, and also follow us on Twitter at BrittanyBits.